Welcome to everybody. First item on the agenda is to sign the minutes of the last meeting. Members, are you happy that's a great record? Agree. All agree? Thank you. Apologies for absence.
Apologies, you see from council together, I didn't
And I think it's a full house otherwise, isn't it? Looks like anyway. Right, members' interest. Disclosable interests.
Yes, Chair. The Buckton Fields, I declare that in the last couple of days, almost, I've got the finance portfolio of Northampton County Council, and if that impacts upon the Buckton Fields, I'll take the appropriate action as you see fit.
Thank you. He has just become finance man. Is it appropriate that he leaves the room, or can he stay? You go. Okay, it's appropriate you go. That solves that.
Okay.
And I wish to say that on the Osden application, I know the person who's against the application. He used to work at LGGS, which is County Council, and also I know the agent who lives about 4 or 5 miles away from me. I don't socialise with either of them, but I do know both of them, so I don't need to leave the room. Councillor.
Yes, sorry, Chair, and I also have worked with a person against that application in a capacity on the police and crime panel, so, but I don't know him socially and I don't go for a drink with him.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Robinson.
Just for clarity, I'm also a county councillor, but I have here is a military officer,
Okay.
and I could sit on the planning committee.
Thank you. So that we're absolutely clear, there are 4 county councillors here. I am one of them. One has declared an interest, this is finance, and there are 2 more that have just spoken. Okay? But we're allowed to speak. We're district councillors tonight, we're not county councillors. Right, party whipping arrangements.
No.
Right, members of the public, that means we don't get together as groups or councillors or anything at all and decide how we're going to vote beforehand. It's all done on the night, and there's no Conservatives will vote with Conservatives or Labour will vote with Labour. It's not decided at all beforehand. So just to tell you, there's a few bits of there is one application on the agenda that's been deferred at the request of the applicant, and that's the application in Hamilton. So at least there's one less tonight. A bit of housekeeping for you. I'm sure you've heard it all before. The fire alarm bell rings. Please go out the way you come, quite orderly, because it won't be a test. Please switch your mobile devices to silent, because we do collect £5 and £10 from you if they ring. £10 if it's a really horrible ring, and £5 if it's a pleasant one. Goes to the chairman's charity, and she sits here as well, so she will collect them. The proceedings are being recorded. Speakers will have 3 minutes, and then you'll hear a tone, and you'll be asked to stop. So please do stop. And that is the only opportunity you'll have to speak, so please, I'm sure you're not going to interrupt during the rest of the debate. No clapping, cheering, hissing, booing, standing up and waving your arms. Again, I'm sure you're not going to do that. During the course of the meeting, you'll see officers talking at the same time as perhaps the speakers are presenting something. It looks like very bad manners. They're trying to find answers to the points that you're making so that the committee can flow. So that's the reason. It's not bad manners, that's the reason for it. The update on performance members you will get via email, so I shan't bother to ever read it out again because you'll get it in a different form. Okay, we go straight to the first application, which happens to be in Daventry, and it's 066. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. First, can I draw members' attention to the late rep sheet for this item?
and also note a correction on the second page where about halfway down residential cumulative impacts should read residual cumulative impacts. This application as originally submitted has the benefit of a resolution to grant permission from 2011, and that resolution was subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. However, this was not taken forward at the time as NCC, in its capacity as the owner of a large part of the site, determined at that time that it didn't wish to dispose of its landholding. The application was kept alive by the applicant, and in 2017, when NCC reversed its position on selling the land, the application was refreshed and revised and resubmitted. Now, those revisions included firstly updating a number of the application documents, and secondly, the application was converted from a wholly outline application with access reserved to a hybrid application, i.e. part outline and part detailed. What's happened since 2011? There have been a number of key things which are relevant to the application. First, of course, the original 2012 National Planning Policy Framework was introduced, and then very recently its 2018 replacement. Secondly, the West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy has been adopted, and one effect of this was to replace one of our SAVE policies, HS2, which relates to this site, with a new policy, Policy N8 in the JCS. Thirdly, this council's adopted the Community Infrastructure Levy. And then finally, outline and then reserve matters approval has been given for Buckton Fields East, which forms the first phase of the overall development that is the subject of the current application. Buckton Fields East is 376 houses, around about access to Brampton Lane, public open space and the school site, and that development has been substantially constructed and occupied. In terms of the scheme as now revised, in summary, it's got the following components, Chairman. First of all, the detailed part of the application, which is denoted Phase 2, Buckton Fields East being Phase 1. Phase 2 has 380 dwellings in 2 sub-phases, together with a spine road and various areas of public open space. The outline part of the application, which is north of the spine road and denoted Phase 3, has further residential development, a school site, local centre with residential above, a care home, employment, park and ride, and again various areas of public open space. In total, there would be up to 1,050 dwellings. And just to be clear, this figure includes the 376 dwellings already approved at Buckton Field East, leaving 674 for the remainder of the site. And then finally, the scheme does show the retention of the farm shop and also the Brampton Valley Road car park. In terms of statutory consultees, there are no objections in principle, subject to the imposition of certain planning conditions and obligations. And the application does include heads of terms for a Section 106 agreement. This would relate to the whole site excluding Buckton Fields East, because Buckton Fields East has its own Section 106 agreement already. As I mentioned, the Community Infrastructure Levy has now come into play, and this again would apply to the site other than Buckton Fields East, as that was consented prior to SIL coming in. Members will see from the report there have been very significant objections from a large number of individuals, and also from Daventry Parish Council and other parishes, as well as the local residents group within Northampton Borough, WASPRA, both of whom, Chairman, you will be hearing from later. In the body of the report, starting on page 26, are the comments that have been received from neighbours in relation to the most recent submission. But for completeness, in Appendix 1 to the report, starting on page 69, you will find the neighbour comments as they were reported to Planning Committee in 2011. And so, if you look at the main report in the appendix, that is the total of comments over the duration of the life of the application. Planning law requires that applications for planning permission be determined in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Members will be very familiar with this requirement, I know, Chairman, but I will expand upon it as much for the benefit of those in the public gallery, so that it can be explained why the report reaches the conclusion it does. Indeed, I would say why it has to reach that conclusion. So in this case, what is the development plan? Well, first it is the West Northamptonshire Joint Court Strategy, and we've got the overall spatial strategy within that document, a site-specific allocation, and then various generic policies. The overall spatial strategy, which is expressed in policies S1, S2, S3 and S4, is about development being concentrated primarily in and adjoining the principal urban area of Northampton. And the core strategy sets out that provision has to be made for about 5,750 dwellings within Daventry districts, part of the Northampton related development area, in the form of sustainable urban extensions. The site-specific allocation in this core strategy is to be found in policy N8, which identifies the site for in the region of 1,000 dwellings and various related uses which are set out in the policy. There are various generic policies of relevance, and those are all listed in the main report. In terms of the development plan, we then have the saved policies of our own local plan. As I've already mentioned, the previous site-specific saved policy HS2 for the site has been replaced by JCS N8, but a number of saved generic policies remain relevant, and again they're listed in the report. Finally, for completeness, the proposed submission version of the Daventry District Part 2 local plan is currently out on consultation. This is not part of the formal development plan, but it's worth noting that the Part 2 plan acknowledges the allocation of the site by including it on the Northampton Fringe Inset map. The consequence of what I've just said, Chairman, is that the provisions of the development plan in this case lead to a presumption in favour of the application. However, it's then necessary to consider any relevant material considerations and assess whether these are such as to outweigh that previous presumption in favour of the application. What is a material consideration in a planning context is a very broad concept, and the report identifies and discusses a whole range of such considerations. I don't propose to run through all those now, Chairman, but will focus on what I see as key considerations, largely having regard to the nature of the objections that have been received. First, traffic, which is an understandable concern of the local community. As a result of that concern, the application has been the subject of very detailed and protracted consideration by the County Council in its role as local highway authority. And it's the overall conclusion of the highway authority that provided there are a number of conditions and planning obligations in place, the proposed development will be acceptable in highway and transport terms. And those obligations include a financial contribution of £2,800 per dwelling towards the North West Relief Road. And in this regard, in relation to highways, Chairman, I draw members' attention to what is said in the late reps about compliance with the relevant National Planning Policy Framework provisions. Related to traffic, there is a concern about the impact of the development on air quality, noting that there is an air quality management area in the adjacent part of the borough. This issue originally gave rise to an objection from NDC. Following discussions involving both our EHO and the borough's EHO, that objection has been removed on the basis of a package of mitigation measures. There's also a strong view from the local community that the development is not sustainable, having regard to what NPPF says in that regard. The report examines this point in some detail, including that the development would be sustainable, and noting that the phasing of the non-residential elements of the scheme needs to be controlled. What I would say at this point, Chairman, is that the overall spatial planning exercise that resulted in this site and others being allocated as an SUE in the core strategy was fundamentally about identifying the most sustainable way of delivering new development which meets the needs of Northampton. A view expressed by many objectors is that the application is about Daventry dumping its housing on Northampton. This does need to be addressed because that is not the case for a number of reasons, Chairman. First, the site is specifically allocated to meet the housing needs of Northampton, not DDC's housing needs. For that reason, the site is identified in the core strategy as being within the Northampton-related development area. The affordable housing element of the scheme, 35% of the total dwellings, will be for the benefit of Northampton, not Daventry, with persons having a connection with the borough having priority for affordable housing. And finally, in this respect, if the application were to be approved, it would contribute to the housing land supply for the Northampton-related development area and not DDC's housing land supply. The other side of the coin, as members will know, Chairman, is that DDC has been and is meeting its housing needs through a combination of approved and allocated substantial development sites in and adjoining Daventry town and in a number of our villages. I made mention of the housing land supply for the NRDA, and this is also a material consideration. As of April 2017, the 2018 figure hasn't been published yet. The calculation for the NRDA showed a figure that was substantially less than the required 5-year housing land supply. This is a consideration that weighs in favour of the application being approved. Overall, Chairman, it's not considered that material considerations indicate that the application should be determined otherwise in accordance with the development plan. Neither is it considered that any adverse impacts of the development would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the development. On that basis, it's recommended that the application should be approved, subject to appropriate conditions and the completion of a satisfactory 106 agreement. It's also important to note that the site does have the benefit of a previous resolution to grant, and there have been no material changes in circumstances since that resolution that should lead to a different conclusion being reached now. Chairman, if members accept that recommendation, the recommendation also requests that the community manager be given delegated authority to negotiate and authorise the completion of the Section 106 agreement and issue a formal permission thereafter. However, that is subject to the important caveat that in the event that an agreement is not concluded within 2 months, 2 months of tonight, that would be, that the application is brought back to this committee for further consideration and determination. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Steve. We have 4 speakers. We normally only have 3 speakers, but when there's a county councillor requesting to speak, we normally are flexible and allow the county councillor to speak as well. So that's why we have 4. So I will allow the agent an extra couple of minutes on his time to balance that out. So first of all, Councillor Rooms from the County Council.
Mr Chairman, councillors, members of the public. My name is Sam Rumans and I am the Councillor for Kingsthorpe North. I represent around 10,000 people, all of whom will be affected one way or another by tonight's decision. Here we are looking at, as the planning documents say, mixed-use development comprising of up to 1,050 dwellings. Okay, that sounds fine, Britain needs housing. B1 employment, residential care home, I think they're both needed too. Park and ride facility for up to 500 spaces. An interesting idea, it's likely to be a complete waste of time in my opinion, as every time I go to Oxford I tend to drive straight past the park and ride centre car parks, but hey ho, that's me. Local centre primary school public open space, again all needed with a growing population. And associated highways and drainage infrastructure. Highways, infrastructure, now that sounds very interesting. Kingsthorpe in particular has been the victim of a hugely increasing load on our roads. Traffic at the best of times is beyond levels you would expect in W1 postcodes, and the air pollution has the worst figures recorded in the whole of Northamptonshire. Councillors, you will all, I am sure, have sat in meetings like this plenty of times before with busybodies like me lecturing you about how our case is special. Some emotive and well put together cases will have been made, but on many occasions the planning officer's recommendation will have been for approval. Each time these new houses, especially on the northern edge of Northampton, were voted through, I'm sure were in good faith and with the belief that the infrastructure could cope. Sadly, I believe most of these cases have been looked at in splendid isolation. As a result of this, the steady build-up of houses without the relevant infrastructure has meant we've ended up with a situation in Kingsall where we face gridlock on a daily basis, harming the social, economic and, dare I say, political aspirations of our area. The only significant proposal we have on the table is for the North West Relief Road. A lovely idea, relieving the northwest of the town, and increasing traffic load on Brampton Lane, which goes down this, one side of the perimeter of Buckton Fields from around 650 movements per hour to 1160 movements per hour. I know that you all, as servants of the people you represent, could not go to sleep with a clear conscience knowing you would vote it on a proposal whose only infrastructure solution would actually increase the pressure on the area you are looking to develop. You must vote against this proposal on the basis that it is simply not workable until we have a full orbital road funded for the north of Northampton. I know you have a housing quota to fill, and the threat of legal challenge is obviously a worry, but you have a moral obligation to do the right thing for the long-term prosperity of the people that you represent and those affected by your decisions. Do the right thing today, vote against this proposal, and bring it back to the table when the infrastructure is fit for purpose in the long term. Infrastructure before expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Bartlett, who represents Worcester.
Councillors, I represent the local residents, many of whom are here tonight. A planning inspector in 1991 rejected this site due to lack of infrastructure. Daventry in 2011, in this very room, rejected this because of lack of infrastructure. The Borough in 2018, against their officer's recommendation, all agreed lack of infrastructure. Nothing has changed. Our population has grown and the consequent demands on our services have got a lot worse. And this, councillors, is the problem. Half this proposal is in outline. Can you, in all honesty, be content with this? Buckton Fields is not within walking distance of any of our existing amenities, so more traffic. Highways, 2 roads. The Relief Road, serving the 3,000 houses in Dallington Grange, will end at Brampton Lane in the middle of our area. This does not relieve us at all. It just makes matters a whole lot worse, as revealed by Highway's own flow figures, which we obtained under an FOI request. Highways forecast that with the Relief Road, the already busy Brampton Lane will have an 87% increase in traffic. Yes, 87% increase in traffic. And Worcester's chair is speaking tonight at the Borough Cabinet meeting. We need a fit-for-function orbital road to take the traffic away. Highways state we have identified this need to deal with current traffic problems and to provide the capacity needed. For 2 years this orbital has been in the public domain. The county is unable to commit to any major projects. Will they ever? And can you really do this to us? Can you? In all sincerity, can you do this to us? As for the 4 improvements in the last transport assessment, it's another tick box. 2 even address traffic going in the opposite direction. As you can see, the direction of the flow of the traffic in our 2013 aerial photograph, the traffic goes south, it doesn't go north. Yet 2 of these improvements cope with traffic going north. And traffic is so much worse today, believe me. And we locals find it astonishing that Highways deem the developer's transport assessment to be fit for purpose. Incompetency is ridiculous. To quote from the papers you have in front of you, the conclusion, additional traffic in an area that already has high traffic levels and additional demands on existing services and facilities. However, these adverse impacts would not significantly outweigh the benefits. End of quote. With great respect, councillors, how well do you know our area? but it's 16 miles away. The person who wrote this obviously doesn't. We are aware that you have been recommended to approve. Our future is in your hands. Believe me, as it stands today, this is not sustainable.
Can you wind up,
Please save us from what would be a total meltdown. I thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'm sure a lot of you support what's being said, but I'd be grateful if you wouldn't clap. Okay?
I don't mind.
Well, I do, because I did ask you
I
very
know, I
nicely
apologise.
if you'd not clap.
I apologise.
Okay, thank you. Third speaker is Mr. Clark from the Parish Council.
Chairman, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to you tonight, which I'm taking on behalf of the Daventry Parish Council, to support the Council's objection to this planning application, with the understanding that our objections are on the basis that the benefits of the proposed development are currently outweighed by its adverse impacts, and therefore do not represent a sustainable form of development, and which also reflect a general concern which is wider than the parish itself. The basis of our objection covered three main issues: phasing, transportation, and land allocation and layout. On phasing, the primary school is a key issue. The planning application for phase 1, I think in 2011, included a primary school. Our current understanding is that it is now planned for completion in 2020. We would like to see a definite timing for the school in the Section 106 agreement, so that it cannot be further delayed, say, into phase 3. We are of the general view that the phasing tends to be pushed back, and this applies to the employment area and the retail area and the community centre, of course, and all those matters that affect residents who currently live on Buckton Fields. On transportation, there is a lack of confidence in the nil deficit approach to traffic volume per development. It remains a major concern given the scale of development arising from the SUs which surround us. The WASPA, I think, have covered this aspect very well, so I won't develop that, except just to say our overall view is that together with other developments, the transport system is not sustainable. Clearly, the likelihood of the North West Relief Road going ahead prior to local government reorganisation can be discounted. On the land allocation within the site and the layout, we have made specific comment which we trust will be taken into account. We have a general concern about the lack of cohesion and consistency through the whole site, particularly open spaces. Phase 2 is far denser than phase 1, and we feel generally that there is no real sense of space in phase 2. The case officer, in the summary of his comprehensive report, acknowledges that there is a very significant community opposition to this planning application. The key factor in this opposition is sustainability. In this context, the accepted definition is the development meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Given that it is accepted that the Buckland Fields will be developed to meet future generation needs, I respectfully put it to the committee that the adverse impacts of this application in front of you tonight do not meet current needs for stated reasons, and they outweigh the benefit on the basis of sustainability.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Park. It seems like you've been coming here many years. Thank you. And the next person to speak is Mr. Barber, the agent. Like I say, I shall allow flexibility to give him 5 minutes rather than 3 minutes should he need it, because I've allowed an extra speaker.
Chairman, would it help if I came and
Wherever you want to stand, sir.
just to the members of the members, thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members. As you've heard, the application before you tonight has the benefit of an allocation for residential development and related uses in the adopted Joint Core Strategy, Policy N8, and includes all of the relevant site-specific components required by that policy. Your officer's report sets out those specific requirements in great detail, but we appreciate that concerns have been raised in respect of the delivery of the non-residential elements. However, the applicants are committed to delivering the development in full, and these elements will be controlled and delivered through the suggested conditions and obligations in the section 106. This is outlined in the officer report. The timing of the delivery of key elements of infrastructure, and in particular the internal link road, have been phased to allow for other uses to come forward early and in a more marketable state and in parallel with the residential development. The link road joining the existing Buckton Fields East development and the Welford Road importantly allows for the early delivery of the primary school, a key concern of the parish council. The applicants acknowledge that the primary school is a key part of the social and community fabric of the scheme, and the County Council and key partners are already working on the design elements to ensure that the school can be delivered in 2020. It is important that the school is delivered as soon as practical, not just for the children arising from this development, but it is essential to meet the current demand for school places. This, however, requires a positive outcome tonight. The application, which has previously obtained a minded to grant resolution, has been updated technically, and the design principles relating to layout and land uses remain consistent with those the committee considered acceptable in 2011. The updated technical assessments have been accepted by all the relevant statutory consultees, including the Highway Authority, and demonstrate that this proposal remains technically robust and in accordance with adopted national and local planning policy, which is confirmed by your officer's positive recommendation this evening. The applicants have made good progress with Buckton Fields East and wish to see progress continue through a continuity build into the western side. There is a clear package of measures identified to mitigate the development reflected across both the conditions and the section 106. These include clear commitments to facilitate and enable delivery in parallel the employment and the local centre. Most importantly, however, this proposal will allow for the early delivery of the primary school, which will be acceptable to pupils existing and new. Members of the committee, this application has the support of your officers, as outlined in their report, accords with both local and national policy, and will add an important element of housing supply to the Northampton-related development area. We look forward to receiving a full positive recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we go to the local member, normally the local member doesn't sit with the planning committee if he's not a member of the planning committee, and Councillor Shepherd isn't. He would normally sit over there, but as we're a bit short of space, he is sitting amongst the planning committee. So he's not a member of the planning committee, but we normally let the local member speak first. Councillor Shepherd.
Chairman, thank you very much. Chairman, I have great sympathy with the arguments expressed quite eloquently by Mrs. Bartlett and, as you explained, Councillor Rumans. I deal with a couple of their points, if I may. Firstly, there is Mrs. Bartlett, I think, referred to the fact that a lot of members of the committee, of course, are not from the Boughton area and have less familiarity with the site. I've lived with this site since 1978. I became a member of the council in 1980, and one of the earliest discussions I recall having with the chief planning officer then was developments in our area, and that this site was identified as at risk. Through huge efforts of the parish council, myself, my wife, the county councillor, and in fact also John Prescott, who was Deputy Prime Minister at the appropriate time. Development of the site has been delayed hugely. Prescott, in fact, got in just before the site was going to be granted permission and said that brownfield sites in Northampton must be developed first. There's been a tremendous interest in the development of this site, and one of the amusing results is that the quality of the build that's on phase 1 is a downside better than it would have been 20 odd years ago. Can I know this is not going to be a popular thing to say to residents, but I'll make two points upon those points made by Sam and by Mrs. Bartlett. Firstly, the existence of the relief road. And I can see that that looks extremely odd, that that is to be funded and then delivers additional traffic to Brampton Lane. That, however, will be the subject to an application, planning application. And at that application, these significant issues will be discussed, and it may even be the subject to an appeal. So there is ample opportunity at that stage to analyse the logic behind the delivery of that particular road. Secondly, a lot has been made of local opposition, and I know that a number of you are here tonight, and that's reflected in the report of Steve Ellis. I can assure, in recent years, I've chaired the Buckton Fields Liaison Forum, which has monitored the delivery of the Phase 1 site. As part of that, we are evolving a sort of residents' association. I've not been involved in that, but I have been certainly talking to residents of the site. And I can assure you, Chairman and members, that whereas there can be significant local opposition, I've not found any local opposition amongst the current residents of Phase 1 to the proposal. That, of course, is because the residents, the 376 families, and there are about 240 of there now, those residents bought their houses on the basis of a community centre, of local facilities, of a school. If suddenly the drawbridge is drawn up and the development of this site is terminated now, there is no school, there is no community facilities. Those 376 families would not be amused. So we must talk, I'm afraid, practically, Chairman, about the real issues involved in this application. I suggest that they are highlighted in quite a neat quote in the Boughton submission. The application is not for a properly planned SUE, but a series of residential developments with scant regard for provision of local facilities for future residents. Well, that, of course, is a highly subjective statement, but I just think it does, I suggest, highlight the area that we should be addressing in relation to the application. The infrastructure revision, particularly of the school, is of concern. The delivery of the school already is a sort of some embarrassment, I think, to all concerned. Until July of this year, the school was advertising on its website opening in September 19, and that clearly, months before July of this year, was impossible. I don't know why there was this delay, but all the residents who bought houses on site today would have done so on the basis of the school being open in September 1919. So they're all disappointed, and they can all those that have young families are disappointed, and those that have young families can quite properly direct criticism to me and us, who are responsible, amongst other things, for securing delivery of infrastructure. And I also can't understand the delay in the County Council bringing forward the site. But nevertheless, we do seem to be making some progress on the delivery of the infrastructure and the delivery of the site. I spoke today to the principal of the Academy Trust, and certainly can confirm what the applicant's representative said, that he is certainly now taking very good steps to advance the provision of the school. We expect a planning application this year, and subject to tonight's decision, he is absolutely confident of opening in 2020. So can I just turn, Chairman, very briefly to a specific proposal. And I'm not a member of the committee, as has been said, so I do need to encourage at some stage one of my colleagues on the committee to propose a resolution along the following lines: to encourage officers to secure, where possible, early delivery of the matters provided for in the heads of terms. can I briefly, Chairman, ask members to turn to page 47 of the document? 47 onwards contains the heads of terms that are drafted by the applicant and that form the discussions between the applicant and officers, culminating in agreed heads of terms and culminating in the section 106. There are some tweaks here that I would invite officers to consider. And as I said, I think the most expedient way is, rather than detail these particular tweaks in the minutes, if those concerned might sort of bear in mind what I say and the appropriate resolutions I've just said, if that could be considered by a member of the committee, that would be helpful. In broad terms, Chairman, the obligations in the heads of terms are in two categories. One, a category that requires funding by the developer, and in order to get funding, the developer is naturally expected to receive some sale monies from the houses. And the second element does not require funding, and it's that element that I particularly want to concentrate upon. So at page 47, we're dealing with affordable housing and libraries. They both require funding, so I don't particularly address that. So if I turn over the page, youth services also address local centre. Now, pausing there, if a resolution is granted today, if a resolution to mind be granted is granted today, I would expect a grant subject to the 106 being agreed this year, so that sometime within the next 2 months or so. Law have completed phase 1, so I would expect them to be ready to move on to site shortly in the spring. Martin Grange are sadly a year behind. The trigger point at 4.2 is a local centre marketing strategy is submitted to the council before the occupation of the 100th dwelling. So if one takes 100 dwellings, starting sometime next year, we've got another couple of years, I suppose. The marketing strategy, Chairman, doesn't cost a beat. If I had to draft a marketing strategy today, I guess it would take me 2 or 3 months at most, possibly less. So, in respect of that aspect, Chairman, it is not impossible to replace the trigger point of 100th dwelling, which is some indeterminate time at the convenience of the developer, to a specific date. And I invite discussion between developer and the council officers as to a specific date. Now, exactly the same point can be made in respect of the employment site marketing strategy. We could have a date on that to advance that and bring it forward so that it's a working document within the next year or so. So the site, the employment site can be marketed, which is the intention of the county council. I think that's been confirmed. The item 6 deals with the school site, the service site made available. I would like to think that reference could be made in 106 there to facilitate the school opening in September 2020. Finally, yeah, I think those are the. Oh yes, further point, Chairman. I can't see any reference in this HOTS to the community centre. That is probably because it's a sort of late addition. There's been discussions between the developer and Boughton as to the preference of the parish council, and what now is said to be the position of the community centre is much later in the report, where it states the details to be submitted to the local centre pursuant to this permission shall include details of space within the local centre, etc. So that I would expect to see back in the HOTS. Finally, on the question of timing, Chairman, item 10 on the HOTS is the park and ride. Now, I share Sam Rubin's view about the park and ride. I know that he's satisfied that it's appropriate for the site, and I suspect there's no one in this room possibly who honestly would disagree. So my suggestion there, because the County Council, of course, I agree joining this document. My suggestion there is that the County Council is invited to agree that it uses its best endeavours to come to a decision on the need or otherwise for a park and ride by a certain date. I would have thought that they could achieve a decision within 6 months. There are county councillors in this room who also, I'm sure, could help facilitate that decision-making process. Frankly, it's very odd that there's been no work seemingly done by the county council on the park and ride, to my knowledge, ever, other than it just comes through as a suggestion. Chairman, those are some detailed comments. As I said in opening, my duty is to my residents who are of the Stratton ward and others locally. Of those residents, there are 300 odd families, 376 shortly families, who moved in and are enjoying the facilities at Buckton Fields. And in all honesty, it is in their interest that these community facilities and education facilities are put in place, and my main focus is to ensure that happens in a timely fashion. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Members? Councillor France.
If there's 376 residents who, for whom this application being approved is so important, and I guess I would have expected at least one of them to stand up in favour. So, how does that work?
Through you, Chairman, we only have one speaking slot, so it's first come, first served for a full.
So, did any of those 376 come forward, or did they just not make the grade?
Well, we widely publicise that there is one speaking slot for, and that usually goes to the applicant or agent.
It's gone where we expected it to go anyway. Okay. Surely something, Councillor Arnold.
Yeah, thank you. I think that part of that answer is Councillor Shepherd has represented some of the people, and we've heard from him with regard to his testimony. I've just got a few comments. I've read through the papers and have come up with a number of themes of concerns and worries, and it's quite overwhelming, if I'm really honest. It's quite overwhelming, and there is real concern and worry out there, and I think that's also demonstrated by the representation we have in front of us today. And I thank you for coming. This is about democracy. This is about listening to both sides of the argument, and you are very impassioned, and this means an awful lot to you. We've heard a little bit about the residents of Phase 1, that to be fair, they also have a voice. They also have a voice, and they also need to be listened to. We've heard a little bit of their testimony through Councillor Shepherd with regard to them. And it appears that they need this development to take place so that their futures and their living standards could be improved. And it's important to, I see some noddings of the head in a negative way, but you cannot ignore other people's rights and allow them to over your right to have a say in this matter. And so I think we need to listen to them as well. But also I want to just briefly talk about what about the people that need the houses? You know, I have a housing and environmental portfolio here in the district, and I'm acutely aware of homelessness. I'm acutely aware of the lack of affordable houses. I'm acutely aware of the lack of housing, full stop, to actually put shelters over the heads of our people. And of course, wherever you have these developments, you have these concerns and contentions. Of course, it would be better if all the infrastructure was in place before we built. Of course, it would be better to have phasing, which is actually meets everybody's satisfaction. But the reality of these developments is you don't get that. What we end up with is just stalemate. No houses getting built, no affordable houses getting built, and people continually living without sufficient shelter in this country, which is an absolute indictment to us as one of the richest countries in the world. In the conclusions, you know, we read about the benefits of the scheme is to deliver housing to meet the needs of Northampton. You know, these aren't even the needs of Daventry. These are the needs of Northampton. The people of Northampton that need shelter over their head. And 35% of those will be affordable housing. 350 so, affordable housing to families that need homes. Of course, they talk very clearly about the adverse effects, and that is acknowledged, and I acknowledge that. There will be an adverse effect, and I'm specifically frustrated about the lack of infrastructure and the lack of coordination between counties and government and developers in making sure things are phased in a logical way that actually tries to resolve everyone's concern. But should it mean we don't build any more homes for people that need them? The final conclusions is that these adverse impacts would not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and in many cases are capable of being mitigated through planning conditions and obligations. And then that final one, that there's been no material changes in circumstances that could lead to a different conclusion now that this should not be granted. I'm satisfied, having read through and listened to your testimonies, which has had an impact, but also considering the people that already live in that area and have aspirations, and the unheard voices of the people that need homes, is that we need to build more houses. And this is one development where we can and where we can influence that agenda, and I would propose that we sustain and approve this planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Do you have a second?
We all need to breathe fresh, clean air.
I'll take Councillor James because I've come in to speak next anyway. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I know Northampton as well as anyone because it happens to be on my birth certificate. And I have grown up and I've lived in Northampton, worked in Northampton, and I've worked in real estate all of my life. And I have seen what was a very, very pleasant market town largely become ruined. I would love to go back to the days when Northampton ended at Banks Lane on one side, Lumbertucks Lane on the other, Hardingstone in the south, and possibly Brampton Lane, or a bit, the Five Bells at Kingsthorpe, where the number 8 bus used to stop. But of course, that's gone. Since then, since those days, and the mistakes that were made, not by the existing or current councils in Northampton in recent years, but by councillors from a long time past who were responsible for that, going right back to the 1950s and 60s. Now, we can't alter the past, and we can't stop the future. We know that Northampton is going to become gridlocked anyway in 10 years. That is a fact of life. So I have every sympathy, whilst I have every sympathy with what the objectives to this development are saying, the plain fact is this: we do not have a 5-year land supply for this particular Northampton-related development area. It is a site which has been allocated for development, and it's a site which, if we were to reject it, turn it down this evening, that decision would be appealed against. We would undoubtedly lose that appeal, and we would end up having to pay costs for doing so. In other words, we've been defeated, not by councillors, we've been defeated by government, by the National Planning Policy Framework, which says that in certain instances, and this ticks all the boxes, we have no option but to grant consent without delay. So I feel very, very sorry that I'm going to have to support this tonight, because, as I say, I've seen what's happened to the town. You don't know the half of it, but it's a fact, and we can't alter it. Sooner or later, of course, the pressures of this development will become such that the outer ring road will eventually be done, and so will when? Sooner or later. So, in seconding this motion, I'd like to take up on board what Councillor Shepherd has said, which that we should agree to a resolution as well as going with officers' advice on this, we should encourage officers to secure where possible early delivery of matters provided for in the heads of terms. And if we do that, I think, given that part of it is a hybrid application, part of it is outlined, that we should reach a satisfactory conclusion. But it's not going to be done tomorrow or next year, but it will be done in time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Williams-Swift.
Yes, I know the site very well because I pass it every day, and one way or the other. And I was very surprised that the first phase is already nearly all occupied. Now, in front of us today, we have a planning application that is already on our SUE, so we can't do very much about it. I would like to speak about two things. One is the air quality, because a lot of one speaker referred to the air quality. And I think we should put a wish that the sooner the North Hall B2 is resolved, that would be, I read in the paper that is that 3.5 million that has been put aside for the orbital, or is that in the, could we have how much the developer will help with the North Orbital, or that is not in the papers?
We'll get that asked for you.
Yes, and secondly, another way, we have spoken a lot about people going to Northampton, and next to the site there is a wonderful facility called the Brampton Valley Way, and I would have wished that the section 106 could incorporate the Brampton Valley Way, because the people who live, for all the people who live in those parts, and old and new, that would be developing, I think the Brampton Valley Way could do with something a bit better for allowing people to go sailing at Pittsford, or even going to the countryside farther afield. And finally, on condition, I mean, I know it's very minor point and it's not what the speakers would like to hear. On the section 3, it's a bugbear of mine. If a tree are, if a landscape is agreed, a landscape treatment, there is it says that if it's fell, the tree fell, we replace it with the same tree. I would like to replace it with trees that are 3 or 4 or 5 year mature, not just with the trees that should have been picked at the beginning, because that also trees help the development of that size. So we have done it in few developments where the trees are replaced after 5 years. If the tree died, it's replaced by a tree that is 2 years plus 5 years. So it's look a bit more green for the residents. But otherwise, unfortunately, because it's in our core strategy, there is not a lot we could do to help the residents of the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to the next speaker, which will be Councillor Ritchie, I'll ask Steve if he could answer the question about costs of the road and the money that's allocated to the road.
I'll cover that.
Oh, okay,
Right, Chairman. We did speak to County Highways this afternoon, just to make sure we got complete clarification on this. The North West Relief Road, with the contribution from this development, is funded. It is subject to planning, but there's that the scoping exercise has already been completed. And that is all that's required to mitigate the impact of this development. The Northern Orbital Road is not currently funded, but there you can't expect this development to fund it because it's not directly related. It's important to remember the basic premise that development has to mitigate its impacts. It can't be expected to resolve existing problems or plan for what might happen in the future. So that is why Highways, I mean, there's been months of negotiation and Highways have no objections. The early delivery of the primary school is something that is now within the report, and that will be part of the terms negotiated. with the section 106. To come back on the air quality management point, there are no air quality management areas in Daventry district, but because there is one in relatively nearby in Northampton Borough, this application does provide some mitigation to ensure that those air quality management areas near our boundaries are not worsened.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Next, Councillor Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Can I wonder if I could ask Maria Taylor. There's just something that was said there, that the primary school being right at the start of the phasing. The report, I'm looking at page 38. It refers to the primary school site. When is the school going to be built, and when is it going to be opened?
We've been assured it will be, they're aiming to open in 2020.
I represent Middlemore here in Daventry, which of course was for years promised it was going to have a primary school. It had a primary school site for years and years, but it still doesn't have a primary school. I think that there is, plenty of reason for, for residents being just a little bit sceptical.
Councillor Ritchie. You may not know, but I'm deaf completely in one ear, but I can hear giggling and laughter and things. Can you please stop it? Is that correct? Carry on.
I'm just very concerned about this. Look, I find myself, as is very often the case, of agreeing with very much of what Councillor Arger says, but not agreeing with all of it. I think, clearly we need housing. I think that we need this space here for housing, and particularly for the affordable housing that we actually need. And there may be some who are objecting to this application because they don't want to see housing, but I don't actually hear much of that. I hear that the objections are about what amenities are there, what sort are we building. Some of you will not know that before this meeting we had a short briefing meeting on planning policies. A reference was made to the need not just to build houses, but to build communities with the amenities that communities actually require. And it just strikes me that that at the moment that is what is the problem here. We need that space for housing, but we need that space for where there is going to be a community, which is why I'm sort of slightly anxious when I see the pacing that is on page 38 and 39. That we assume we will wait until the houses are built, then assume that the other bits shall be put on at the end. If I was going to support this, I would want to see that done differently. And of course, if there is one major problem I see here, it is the traffic problem. Now, of course, this area was put here, was designated for housing in the Joint Core Strategy. But the Joint Core Strategy assumed that a whole lot of other things would take place. And if they are not taking place, then, to me, I think this needs to at least be rethought. I feel that as it stands, that unless there are a lot of conditions, a lot stronger conditions that were put in about how the development is going to be phased, how these facilities are going to be provided, I wouldn't feel I could support this.
Well, the 106, of course, will be negotiated by probably the strongest negotiator this council's got. That's the lady sitting to the left of me, so don't buck your head on me either. But this is the person that will get what this council wants, I can assure you. Councillor Charter next. You indicated you'd like to speak, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have very little to add to what's been said already. As one of the people who worked very hard to produce the core strategy, I've obviously in support of the policy N8 in particular that says that this is an allocated site to assist with the growth of Northampton town. I'm conscious of the fact that the Northampton residential development area does not have a 5-year land supply, and that means that some policies can be set aside by the permission granters, who ultimately are the Secretary of State, often working through the Planning Inspectorate, responding to a potential appeal. I would ask members to bear that in mind. I would also ask members to bear in mind that the provision of some of the infrastructure is to be argued for within the Section 106 agreement. It is a shame that the North West Relief Road hasn't yet been built, but I'm pleased to learn that it is funded and an application will go through the system later this year. That's a good sign, because I think members should also bear in mind that although the application says up to 1,050 dwellings, 376 of those are already located in Buxton Fields East, so we're talking about just over 670 homes here. They can't possibly build them all at once, so that will be phased over a number of years, during which it's to be hoped, and I believe, that the North West Relief Road in particular and the primary school will appear. I do think we have to bear in mind that the future of local government organisation in this area is as yet uncertain. We're waiting for a response from the Secretary of State from the proposal issued by the 8 councils saying, here's what we think you should be doing, and meanwhile we've got to carry on with doing what we should do. I'm in favour of officers' advice here. We need to approve the application so that work can begin in providing this necessary housing and other facilities, and bearing in mind that it will take quite a long time to actually deliver. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Steve, can you come back and answer a few of the points raised?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. In terms of funding,
This is that.
It's mine, I thought I switched it off.
That's all right, it's only £5, that's not too many.
In terms of funding for the North West Relief Road, Maria has covered that, but I suppose it has to be said the reality of the climate we're in is that there needs to be funding from development to allow infrastructure to happen, and that's why there is a contribution of £2,800 index linked in the intended 106 to make a big contribution to the cost of the North West Relief Road. Sustainability is the second thing I'm going to come back on, Chairman. I'm going to link that with phasing. I mean, the report does set out why officers consider the scheme as sustainable, and a big part of that is, yes, it is going to have facilities within it. But I think we need to be realistic about how that happens. First of all, in relation to, for example, the local centre and employment, there has to be a commercial aspect to it. People will have to be prepared to invest in those facilities to deliver those facilities. And that will only happen when there's a critical mass of population. Where we can, the 106 and conditions as proposed will impose certain triggers on what happens with infrastructure and the services and facilities. I think thirdly, I would have to say that urban extensions don't exist in a bubble. They are urban extensions in name for a good reason. They are extensions, in this case, to the substantial urban area that is Northampton. And there are local facilities, and I have to disagree with Andrew on this point, there are some local facilities in White Hills which would be walkable from the development. And obviously there are local facilities further afield in Kingsthorpe. and so the SUE can take advantage of those facilities. I think finally, in terms of sustainability, we have to look to the long term. I mean, members have made the good point that this development will not happen overnight. First of all, it'll be a significant time for it to be developed, and thereafter we hope there'll be a very significant time when it's occupied and in use. And I'd be inclined to suggest that we should not be overly concerned if we don't get all the facilities in the short term, because if the SUE proves to be sustainable in the long term, that's the key thing. It needs to be sustainable for the residents long term, and that's what I believe will be delivered. I'll speak specifically about the school, because clearly that's not a private commercial investment. That's something delivered broadly by the public sector. It is the case, as Councillor Shepherd has indicated, that there is movement with the delivery of the school. There have been discussions with this department about the school. We are aware that there's a trust involved already in delivering the school, and I would anticipate that an application will come forward shortly. We've seen that with the Monksmoor School, that schools can be built relatively quickly. And so I would say that an opening in 2020, basically 2 years from now, is doable. So that's the school. Just going back to the structure generally, I have noted Councillor Shepherd's comments about trigger points for certain things. The applicants are sitting developers are sitting in a public gallery. They will have heard those comments, and those are things that we will certainly take up and discuss in the context of the 106 agreement. The school was mentioned, sorry, not the school, the scheme was mentioned by Councillor John Clark, and made reference to a lack of cohesion and also a higher density in this second phase of the development. I don't necessarily see high density as being a bad thing. One reason why it's higher density is that there is a greater proportion of affordable housing within the next phase, but also there is generally a larger number of smaller houses, and I think we have to view this that we need to be producing housing that meets a range of households. It's not just about producing 4 and 5 bed houses, it's about producing housing that meets all types of household, and so I think in the sense that higher density is meeting that housing need, it's a good thing, not a bad thing. I think finally, Chairman, Councillor Irving Swift made a number of detailed points. There was reference to Brampton Valley Way, and also about how we address the tree replacement condition. I mean, I've heard what you've said, and obviously we can take that on board as we progress. I don't think I need to say anything else at this stage, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I've got one more councillor indicated to speak, and then perhaps if nobody else is serious, there is something else.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Wesley first.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard a lot of things about this development today, about how it's needed and housing is certainly needed, and it was a very eloquent speech from my colleague here about affordable housing and people needing homes. We've also heard a lot about the worries about infrastructure, and there is this push-pull thing. But can I just actually ask this question? We've heard a little bit about on the training today about viability and about the delivery of affordable housing and everything else. Can we be certain that this site is viable at the levels of affordable housing and everything else that we've actually heard about today? Is that actually going to be available, and is it actually going to be delivered? Because it's easy for us to be saying this is a fantastic thing, not for everybody, but in providing facilities in terms of housing and the infrastructure. But if it ain't delivered, it ain't a good thing.
Right, Steve, answer that one quickly.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In relation to Buckton Fields East, there was a viability exercise submitted by the applicant, and as a consequence, the affordable housing provision on Buckton Fields East is 20%. On the balance of the site, the applicant has not submitted a viability exercise. They are proposing 35% affordable, and therefore, on the face of it, we must assume that is their position, and that's the basis on which members are minded so too. That's the basis on which the planning consent will go forward.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
My question's for Steve again. It's around timing. The main problem, it seems, is around infrastructure, more specifically this northwest relief road. If it's the case, as we've learned tonight, that the application is going to go in towards the end of the year, why wouldn't you and we delay our support until this is in place? It just seems a slightly funny way around. That's what I'm trying to think.
Steve?
Yeah, sure. I think it's two things actually, Chairman. Firstly, the Highway Authority in its response is not saying to us that the North West Relief Road has to be in place before this development can be consented. But secondly, the development itself will generate funds to allow the road to happen. So, there is a chicken and egg here. I can understand everybody's point of view that in the ideal world, infrastructure will be there before a single house is built. But that's not the world we live in, and we have to accept that infrastructure will come forward, in part funded through development.
Yeah, through you, Chairman, in those cases, for example, Daventry development was delayed, going back a few years, because there was a cap to how many new Daventry homes before the Florida bypass Daventry development link, and because of that delay, we attracted external funding. That is not the case here.
Okay. Right, I think we've had a good debate. We have a proposal, the application be approved, which is not seconded, with some additions that the negotiating of the 106 is done very, very tightly and strongly, which, knowing the person and people involved, it will be. They won't get away with anything. I'm sure they won't try and get away with anything. So, subject to that, all those agree with that the application should be approved, please show.
Eight.
Right, those against?
1, 2, 3.
Any abstentions? Must be one, because it's 8.
No, there's 2.
There's one
We're
out.
2. We're 2 missing.
And Councillor Long being out.
Right, so it's definitely 8-3 then, is it?
Do you want to do it again?
1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It can't be 8-3, it has to be. No, I didn't count, Councillor. There are 12 members of the planning committee sitting there.
Should we do it again, Chair?
Right?
Do you want to do it again, Chair?
I didn't vote at all.
No, do you want to do it again?
Yeah, let's do it again. Those for the application. I want it dead right.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Right, those against.
1, 2, 3. Oh, they got 9, so 9.
There's 9, wasn't it? Right, okay. But I'm going to say we've got to get the numbers right. The application is approved. There will be a break for a couple of minutes. Should people that have come purely for that application, so if you want to go, you can go. Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
need to speak to anyway. There's some council from here. Some advice,
He does need that.
Sam, it might be counselling as well.
It's mostly your fault. We've actually done nearly everything, we just forgot to get back.
Did you say Catherine?
Yes, he's just come.
Have enough money in the bank, so that we'll always build
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we start again. Oh, we can't start without the case officer. Right, cheers there. We're going to start without you, Catherine. Yeah, I did know. Right, the next application is in Dartford on Weed, Dartford Street, Weed, 0484.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we begin, Chair, I would like to draw members' attention to the representations before you and to advise that we have received further comments from the County Highway Authority, but also from the District Conservation Officer, and the light of their advice, it's advised that the actual reasons for refusal, which relate to both conservation and highways, is actually removed from the officer's recommendation. You'll see from the site location plan that the application site is outside the confines of Weedon Village. To the east you have the now conservation area, and to the west is the railway itself. To the south you've got the A45. The application before members tonight is a purely an outline application with only the access to be approved. Members would have heard that in accordance with the Act, an application should be determined in accordance with the development plan, and the development plan in this case is the both the Daventry District Local Plan and the West Northampton Joint Core Strategy. In the Daventry District Local Plan, Weedon is identified as a restricted infill village, and therefore it promotes development just inside the confines of the village. As already said, this site is identified as outside of the confines of the village. Members will be aware that Part 2 of the local plan, which is currently under consultation, also identifies this site as being outside the confines of the village. The West Northampton Joint Core Strategy does allow for development outside the confines of the village. However, this is only permitted where there would be, in exceptional circumstances, where it would enhance and maintain the vitality of the rural community or contribute towards and improve the economy. In these circumstances, the applicants have not identified any exceptional circumstances which would demonstrate any compliance with this element of Part 1. In any case, the Council is now able to demonstrate a 5-year land supply and has also, in fact, exceeded its rural housing figure, and as such the latter part of policy R1 is now engaged. The latter part of policy R1 advises that once the housing requirement for the rural areas has been met through plan conditions or future allocations, further housing development will only be permitted where it can fulfil a criteria, and that criteria advises that it will result in environmental improvements on site or is required to support the retention or improvement to essential local services that might be under threat, and is informed by an effective community involvement exercise, or is a rural exception site, or has been agreed to an adopted local plan. As the proposal would involve the development of greenfield site on the edge of the village, which has been quite clearly identified as being outside the confines of the village, it's not considered the result of environmental improvements as envisioned by the first criteria. Inevitably, actually, it would result in the loss of a greenfield site. There's no evidence that has been submitted to suggest that the development is required to support the retention of all the improvements to essential local services that may be under threat. And whilst actual consultative responses have indicated the need for Section 106 contributions to mitigate the impact of the development upon facilities such as schools, there's no indication that this development is required to support these facilities. It is acknowledged that applicants did engage with the Parish Council and held a public consultation earlier in the year in order to provide opportunity to obtain detailed comments from the local community on the emerging scheme. However, there is equally no adopted neighbourhood plan. As a result, officers consider that the proposal still fails to satisfy the requirements of policy R1 as already outlined to you tonight, and as such will recommend that this application be refused, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We have 2 speakers. Mrs. Ramsfield from the Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm representing the Parish Council. I'm here to plead with the committee members tonight to support this application for 47 houses at Daventry Farm. The development offers the sort of housing that Weedon people want and will provide much needed boost to the local community and economy of the High Street area in Road Weedon, which has deteriorated over years. It includes bungalows to enable older residents to downsize and a decent percentage of affordable housing which is unavailable anywhere else in Weedon. The development joins the High Street in the part of the village known as Road Weedon, which you will know as part of the A45 leading up to the crossroads. The locality has been declining for years, due in part to the unpleasant effect of heavy traffic, which thunders down the road. The DDL may reduce traffic pollution, but will also reduce passing trade, on which the smaller businesses like the several takeaways and pubs on the high street, rely heavily. In Weedon, our post office closed this summer, as did a local greengrocer. Staff at the Road Weedon Tesco convenience store on the high street have mostly been on short-term contracts since the store opened because of the uncertainty about its survival. This is not good for a primary service village. Weedon has had far less development than comparable primary service villages in the district and is losing local services as a result. The Joint Cause strategy permits development in rural communities to sustain local services and counteract economic decline, and for this reason this development should be permitted. The Council's assertion that it has fulfilled its rural housing quota should be disregarded in this case, in the interest of achieving a better balanced and more sustainable community in Road Weedon. Before Christmas, the District Council will designate much of the High Street in Road Weedon a conservation area. This is really concerning local traders, as it will make business premises more expensive to maintain up to conservation standards, and it will be costlier for start-up businesses. High Street business premises and housing have up to now been relatively cheap, but this will no longer be the case, a perverse effect of a well-meaning new planning policy. Residents near the site have raised no objections to this small extension to the village. So rigid assistance on a village curtilage boundary, which I believe is not yet fully ratified, should not be allowed to rule out what is a very sensible and much needed development. The developer has consulted closely with residents, kept us informed at all stages, and we observe has made substantive modifications to meet our own concerns and those of other authorities. Please do not let planning policy get in the way of a development which will make a declining and neglected locality more sustainable, both economically and socially. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Hatchett, who's the applicant.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. This application site was proposed for allocation in the Weedon Neighbourhood Plan, as supported by the local community following almost 4 years of extensive community consultation and evidence gathering. As we know, the plan was ultimately withdrawn as the examiner was unable to recommend the plan to be adopted due to a number of issues, but these did not relate in any way to the suitability of this site for housing. This is an important material planning consideration in the determination of this application. Within this context, we met with the Parish Council last summer to gauge whether there would be local support to bring this site forward. The Parish Council were agreeable in principle, provided that the proposed housing mix met their local needs, to include smaller houses and some bungalows. Further meetings took place to ensure emerging proposals met Parish Council's aspirations, and the scheme before you is the result of the extensive local engagement. This is reflected by the support provided by the Parish Council, ward member, and the fact that there have been no objections at all from local residents. Notwithstanding the above, the application is recommended for refusal. The third reason can be resolved if members of the committee are minded to grant permission subject to the preparation of an appropriate Section 106 agreement. Reasons for refusal numbers 1 and 2 claim there is conflict with the development plan, albeit the officer's report acknowledges that there is both compliance and conflict with its policies. Reason for refusal number 2 states there is conflict as the housing requirement for the rural areas has been met. However, this glosses over the fact that only 69 dwellings have been permitted in the village since 2011, whereas other primary service villages have taken significantly more. Malton, for example, is expected to deliver 769 dwellings by 2021. Furthermore, since 2014, only 4 affordable homes have been delivered in Weedon, and based on the latest housing needs survey, there is a residual need for at least 13 more affordable homes. This is exactly why the neighbourhood plan sought to allocate housing sites, and without this in place, there is no other realistic opportunity for housing schemes of a sufficient size to deliver affordable housing within the context of the current development plan. Reason number 1 states there are no exceptional circumstances to justify this development. Policy R1, however, states that exceptional circumstances include where a development will help support the retention of or improvement of essential facilities that may be under threat. As we've heard from the Parish Council and in their consultation response, reduction in passing trade within the High Street following the opening of the link road is likely to threaten essential services, such as the local convenience store. This is an opinion of local community representatives, and to my mind, clearly provides the evidence that exceptional circumstances exist. In summary, the proposed development is fully supported by the community. It will meet local housing needs. It will help sustain essential local services and facilities. Moreover, it will achieve the objectives the Labour plan has specifically set out to address. Even if there is some minor conflict with the development plan, the scheme should be determined on the basis of its compliance with the development plan as a whole. As such, I respectfully request the members support the proposal and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, my councillor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I live in Weedon. I know it quite well. And I support this application. Everything that's been said this evening pretty much hits the nail on the head. The village is going to, without question, change with the development road coming in. And this is a good opportunity, I think, to speed things up for the village and ensure that it does remain sustainable. Losing the post office has been not great for me personally, for the whole village. I'm surprised how much effect that has had. Often you think, oh, lost the post office. Not much. It's been a big impact. All the infrastructure is there. It's odd. In the last application, the infrastructure wasn't there. On this one, it is. Everything's there. There's quite a bit of policy going against this, though. But I think on this, in this instance, we should look at this and listen to what the local people are saying. They understand it better than most of us. I understand this one a bit better, as I say, because I live in the village. And I'm on the receiving end to a certain extent of the lack of affordable housing. Where my youngest daughter is a teacher, and she can't afford to buy a house around us. So I would propose that we go against officers' advice, and we need some help to bolt this together. But I truly think this is a good thing for the village and a good thing for the district.
Right, planning reason why to go against officers' advice is
Exceptional circumstances.
Exceptional circumstances.
which are.
Bypass.
The bypasses, yeah.
You realise the same number of houses could be built, every one for as an affordable unit, if it was an exception site and it demonstrated local need. The only difficulty would be that the landowner would get less money for them, land value for them. But you could have those there within the planning system. If they demonstrated local need, everyone could be a bungalow and an affordable house, everyone could be, if that demonstrated local need. But the landowner wouldn't get so much money for them. That's a fact, isn't it? Right, so the points you made, the planning points, you've got them.
Yes, if I could just come back to members.
Before I get a second, anyway.
There was a mention that in regards to the previous neighbourhood plan, that this site was allocated to part of trees and everything. I'll just remind members that the neighbourhood plan has never been named. Therefore, it does not form part of the development plan. It does not form part of your considerations tonight. What is part of our development plan currently is the fact that the region is a restricted infill village, and this is clearly outside the confines of the village, and therefore we should not be seeking to approve it under the current development plan. I'd also like to remind members that part 2 of our local plan, the draft submission is out for consultation, and I've placed emphasis on that, the last word, consultation, and as such, if parish council, as with local member, felt that this site should form part of the village confines, then the representations to part of the local plan should be made to include the site, but under the current development plan, it's clearly outside the confines.
Right, we've got a proposal the application be approved for the given reasons. Do we have a second now? Councillor Robinson, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Basically, we've listened largely to people who live there, haven't we? And surely we must put a great deal of weight on that. we don't live there, but I don't live there, Councillor Smith does live there. We listened to him as well. He's in favour of this development. Our policies should be flexible enough in this case to grant planning permission. I'll leave it to others to decide which of those policies we must be made aware of in order to give us a planning reason. I still think that basically Weedon is neglected. We've heard so, and that's one of the reasons that I want to support it.
Thank you. You might get thrown back at you that somebody says, well, you allowed it in Weedon, why can't you allow it in Crick?
Doesn't work.
Right. Anyway, the next speaker is Councillor James.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, when I first read this report, I thought this is a very borderline case. And I must say that listening to the representative in the Parish Council, I agree with everything she said, because it doesn't only affect Weedon, it also affects what happens in Weedon can affect the surrounding villages too. Like the closure of the post office there affects the people in Everton, just like the closure of Forskets years ago, the newsagents, affected the people of Everton, until we ended up with nobody wanting to deliver our newspapers at all for those of us who live in Everton. So it would, in a sense, it would contribute to regenerating the high street and also saving some of the services in the village itself, because there has been over many years a shift away from the centre of Weedon, away towards the high street and now of course the Watling Street itself. Tesco's will lose some passing trade as a result of that the new road or bypass. So an extra 47 houses will make up. There is a need for some affordable housing and bungalows in Weedon, as identified in a housing needs survey. This would fit the bill. And then this is an important thing to remember, that whilst we talk about the rural areas, there are very few rural areas in Daventry district now. They are semi-rural areas. Even where I live in Everton, I regard it as a semi-rural area. It's not down near Banbury, out in the sticks there, as I call it, out in the hinterland, where you can wander along the lanes and see no one, or even not even a car. But so it's important to bear that in mind, because mentioning rural areas, we think of, oh yeah, you know, very, very quiet, and you can hear the birds whistle. Not so. And although it's outside the confines of the village, it's close to the high street itself. And surely that high street now needs some regeneration, to get it active again, like it used to be at one time. It used to be. Remember when there used to be a cinema there in the high street at one time? So I think it would make a great contribution to Weedon to have this development. And at the end of the day, where would you sooner have development? Off the high street here, or in New Street, for example, where we've rejected it because it would be undesirable in the extreme. So, you know, that is an ideal place to site 47 houses. And I might add this, although it's a greenfield site, there's a small haulage business being run from there. Isn't this a brownfield site as well?
So I must challenge one thing you said there, Councillor.
Yeah.
Councillor, you said that if you don't get a load of houses, you'd lose your post office and your news agent. We did get a load of houses in my village, within the confines of the village, like 200.
Yeah.
And we straight away lose our post office, and then we lose our news agent. So it's got nothing to do with, I can assure you, with housing.
Yeah.
But it went the opposite way around.
Every little bit helps.
Anyway, Councillor Aubrey is next.
Yeah, thank you. You know, policies are really important. You know, I have one for the law and following the letter of the law. But policy isn't law, it's not statute. Will always be guidance. And there is some subjective views here with regard to what is sort of exceptional circumstances and whether in fact these units will actually protect local amenities, which I'm sure they would do in many ways logically. But you don't have to rely upon my sort of logic, you just have to listen to the parish council with regard to the type of facilities that they need, the new life it will bring into the area. And surely we are wiser than just to blindly follow policy. You know, we're talking here about affordable housing again. You know, once again, we have a scenario where everyone's crying out, you hear it on Newsnight in Question Time, no one's building enough houses, the government needs to open the floodgates to build houses. And when we have a particular scheme which is supported by the parish council, which could possibly meet the exceptional circumstance rule based on subjective opinion, we are then turning it down. You know, so I feel quite strongly that we should be supporting this, primarily because that's what the people in that area want. And the other issue for me, which is massive, all the infrastructure is there, the local member himself supports it, and who are we to deny localism? Who are we to deny that community the ability to help sustain their lifestyle, their community? And so I will be voting against officer.
Before I go to Councillor Rayner, you want to come back?
I think we're hearing loud and clear what members are saying, but the reason officers have recommended this for refusal is because it's for the applicant to make a case that an exception is appropriate, an exception to policy is appropriate, and that exception case has not been made. If it was an exception site with guaranteed housing, this is an outline application, a plain and simple housing development. We've got real sympathy for the position, but neither the parish council for representations nor the applicant have actually made a case to say it's appropriate to not apply R1 as spelled out in approved policy, and that's the position. I think officers can go into a bit more detail.
If I remind members what Part 2 of R1 states is required to support the retention of or improvement to essential local services that may be under threat, in particular the local primary school or primary health services. Now, what you are hearing from the applicants and also the parish council is they are very concerned about the bypass and passing trade. Yes, there's many post offices around the district are closing down. We're seeing that and sometimes local parishes are actually getting a community shop together to keep their post office. I understand that there is no information or no financial information supported with this application. I also like to remind members of our good appeal record, especially with policy R1.
I think I just want to call members' attention to something Councillor Orger said. He referred to subjective opinion. I think that's all members do have at the moment. It is subjective opinion on whether that these facilities would be lost. The US officers don't have any financial evidence presented for us to consider to demonstrate that that's the case today. Equally, I hear that from the parish council they do believe that this is a site which is reasonable in their opinion to be included in the confines. We do have a procedure in place. We have our Part 2 local plans, the draft submission up for consultation at this very moment. Those representations can be made to us as a local authority to include that as part of the confines. Today, as it stands, the site is outside the confines of the village. I feel that members take a very big risk in approving the site, which is identified as outside the confines of the village, and this will equally have an impact on other applications which will be before members and in future occasions. There is a process, if the parish council wish to include this site to be within the confines of the village through the current draft submission of our Part 2 local plan.
Chair, can I just respond to that? You know, how many times have you sold? Sorry, sir.
We've got an order of speaking.
Okay.
And sort of, and I also like to add to Trung's point. We also do not know what will happen when the bypass is opened. We don't know that effect on existing businesses. There's quite a few businesses which are quite in a niche market, especially along that stretch. So if people did want to go and visit, they will actually go and visit them. It doesn't always rely on passing trade or passing vehicles going past.
Thank you, Catherine. I've got Councillor Irving Swift next.
I will agree with Catherine Daniel. I bought, or my daughter bought a wedding dress at Wigan. Now, I think the officer said it all. The problem I have, it's not that I don't want to do. I think, you know, we had a good case of the village. But if we go against R1, all the money we did put on our plan to be robust is going to be lost. Because if we accept that side, we have opened the gate for any others on appeal. And that is what I think, because it's not you are talking 40 houses plus. It's not a minor little 4, 5 or 6 houses. And I think what I hear is that if the applicant had something a bit more robust on why he wants it, and with more meat on the bone, we could consider it in a more, we hear what they say, but I think we need a feasible feature. We need, he might want to put a side of exception to mitigate whatever, but at the moment I think if we go against our policy, we are endangering all our local plans. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Irving Swift. To sum up what's just been said there, if the applicant and the parish council, if they approached it a different way, they could get exactly what they want on the site if it was done properly, properly within the planning system. I'm sure it would come with a recommendation for approval, but by doing it this way, if you approve it, you risk any one of your villages that's subject to R1 getting another load of housing because you did it, you allowed it in Weedon. You may shake your head, but that will be a fact. Councillor Wesley, you're next. Then Councillor Ritchie after.
Yeah, I mean, there's a local want for this. It's been asked for by the local community. I know this has already been said. And I understand what the officer is saying here, but we're always being told that precedent isn't part of planning. We're always being told that. Precedent has nothing to do with it. You can't have it, and we can't have it both ways here. Either precedent is precedent or it's not precedent. Now, we can actually decide on this committee what we want to decide, really. We've also heard, we don't know whether the high street is going to be it's going to be a detrimental effect of the high street with the road. No, we don't know that, but we don't know anything. But we also heard earlier on in this meeting, didn't we, that that there were going to be schools built and there were going to be roads built, etc., etc. Well, nobody knows lots of things about planning decisions, but we support them on the basis of likelihood and the basic practicality of the world and how it works. And we all know that bypass is bound to affect Weedon, isn't it? And the Weedon residents want this development, and I think we should actually support it. And I said precedent is nothing. Maybe we should put on the basis of a financial S106 and to understand fully the sewer agreement. But we're here to do the right things for our communities, and I think it's actually quite refreshing that we've got a community here that wants to look after itself, expand, and make itself viable. And I think viability of the village, viability of the community, and those exceptional circumstances are what we should be looking at here tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Winston. Before I go to Councillor Ritchie, who's next.
Through you, Chairman, obviously each case is considered on its merits, but what we're talking about when we say precedent here is we need to prove the exception. We need to have some robust evidence that it is appropriate, that these are exceptional circumstances to go against policy. If all we've got is subjective opinion, which is what we've got because it's just what a couple of people have said at this meeting and not robust evidence presented in the course of the application administration, then that's not what we're saying is that's not really enough to agree that an exception to policy. I mean, maybe that case can be made, but I'll put it to members that either defer the decision or refuse and invite them to resubmit, making a better case. And I would also point out that an exception housing site doesn't have to be 100% either. This is an outline application, and a submission might be the way to resolve this without leaving us wide open.
Okay. Right, Councillor, I'm giving you the order so you know where you're coming. Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Chandler, Councillor Parker, and then Councillor Organ.
Can I check the end, please?
Councillor Frost.
Oh, Councillor Frost, I beg your pardon.
Is at the end, yeah, it's just added.
Okay, just added. Councillor Ritchie.
Well, can I begin by saying what we have just heard doesn't seem to fit with what I have been hearing on the couple of years I've been on this committee. In many an application, by being sure that precedents don't exist. And I simply don't believe it. Now, I don't agree with some of the comments that have been made about this application on the grounds that we ought to accept it because it is what local people want. That would be simply as bypassing our responsibility to take decisions. But I think that what we need to do, we need to listen. And if local people have a good case to make, we need to listen to that case and to respond to it. I'm normally hugely opposed to building around about villages, outside villages, taking away bits of countryside. I don't feel strongly about this particular bit of countryside. I can see a strong reason why it is good for Weedon. Far too often we find that within villages, the number of houses, the houses tend to be built in twos and threes. They don't reach the threshold where there is a requirement to provide affordable housing. Here we have got a scheme that is actually going to provide houses that Weedon actually needs. I feel we're being hugely bureaucratic if we're simply turning around and say, well, look, of course we're going to agree this if they go back and write it up in a different way. If we feel that this is a sensible case that is being made, well, goodness sake, surely we can accept what we have been told. If we feel that the applicant could have sold the case even more strongly, that should have nothing to do with our decision. Our decision is to do with actually what are the facts and what are the obvious benefits of this application. I'm totally in favour of it.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid that's not good enough. The danger of precedent is not to do with what people have been expressing from the floor here as their fears and saying that there is no such thing as precedent. What's wrong with this application is that it doesn't say we will provide affordable housing of the type that the parishioners need. It just says, I want permission to provide 47 dwellings. And once that permission is granted, they can submit a detailed application for 47 dwellings of any kind. And it will be very difficult to refuse that because you've given them permission to build 47 dwellings. If you agree that what they should be building is 47 dwellings, of which some are the bungalows that the local parishioners need, then that's what the applicant should have asked for. And that's all we're saying is that the application as before us this evening is not acceptable because it's against policy. But if it were to contain that information, then that would mean that we could grant that permission, as Councillor Ritchie says he thinks we ought to. If we grant permission against this application, we are being irresponsible because the applicant can then do what he likes with his 47 dwellings.
Or could.
Not
Or
can.
could, yeah.
Could. Yeah, could. Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Councillor Parker, then Councillor Organ, and Councillor Frost. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've listened to everything and I'm agreeing with the previous speaker. If the application was correct, it would go a lot further than I think it should go tonight, simply because it's against policies. It's against R1, and that's important to the rest of the villages in the area. You have to actually go with what the policies say, or have a good reason, a very good reason, to go against it, i.e. the application is put in a different way. The officers have said, I hope I'm not misquoting, that the countryside, the part 2 is out for consultation. And if they did something by putting in representations, it would, no, I was going to say probably go through, that's the wrong, but the representation would be heard and things like that. Noted. And noted. I don't know what else the parish council need as guidance or the application for the applicant to do things the correct way, i.e. the neighbourhood plan was put in and withdrawn by an inspector because it wasn't correct. Yeah? The other thing about the post office and things like that, I went to an opening on Saturday to Cretan where they opened or moved a post office and shop under the community. It can be done if people do things and do it the correct way and put in the application which is correct. It's not for us to decide or to think we know what they want. We should go on what the application says, and that's why I will vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker.
If I could just come back to you on that point that Councillor Parker has made. I think a good example to use is Malton Parish Council. Very recently, very early on during this part 2 local plan process, officers had obviously drawn lines around where the confines were. Well, actually, Malton Parish Council, at a very early stage, approached the policy team and did advise them they disagreed with that. And they redrew the plan having regard to what Malton Parish Council wanted to do and wanted to do as part of their development sites.
That was through a neighbourhood plan as well, so which will become part, and as you're aware, neighbourhood plans become part of the development plan. So it was also a site which I believe we won at appeal and it was dismissed at appeal, or it was recommended for refusal, but the Malton Parish Council then managed to get it in and it's been subsequently been approved by this council.
That's right. Councillor Frost.
Yeah, I agree with Councillors Parker and Chandler. I think that if you ride roughshod over planning policy at a peril, and yeah, I'd like to ask a question specifically about the neighbourhood plan and this scheme that was in it. It's my understanding that if it failed, examiner failed it because it was incorrect. I'd be really keen to know just how much Whelan want this plan, because the scheme was part of a plan that failed. Did the people of Wheaton want that scheme to succeed? Because if they did, I can't help thinking that, sorry, did they want the plan to succeed? Because if they did, I can't help thinking that it would work. What I'm trying to say is, we're being told that the people of Wheaton want the scheme. I'd like to know whether that's really the case by looking at the scheme within the neighbourhood plan. That's allowed.
Officers, can we give an answer to that?
Not really something we can answer tonight, Chairman, because planning policy colleagues will know much more about the specifics of that whole story.
There are 2 sides to planning. I know you're a new member, but there's the planning you see here, and then there's policy.
Sure, I thought we might have a note.
That is the other side of planning, which these don't get, well, they do get involved in it, but not direct. Okay. Well, we have a proposal.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Reilly, you were next as well.
Yeah, thank
Last.
you. The reason I tried to come back earlier because they were actually talking about the issues that I've raised, and I wanted to supplement the question, which has probably lost its impact now. Look, we want to do the right thing here. We want to do the right thing here, and we want the affordable housing, and we want the bungalows, and we don't want to be had over. That's really, really important. That's really important to me. So, the question I have, and looking at the makeup of this council, this committee, is there a way of resolving this in a way that keeps this application alive, okay, and allows then the guarantees we want about affordable housing and about the bungalows, to have that written in stone, and also then resolving around the exceptional circumstance issue, but keeps the application alive and kicking, and then we can, I don't know whether you call that a deferment.
Well, we'll find out. I see exactly what you're asking for. We'll ask the officers so that the committee know what their options are.
It's ultimately in the hands of the applicant, but where councillors minded to defer, that might give the applicant a chance to resubmit. Committee could refuse, and if they did so, then the applicant gets a free resubmission anyway.
Okay.
And if that resubmission overcame the reasons for refusal, then you're away. But it is really, we could set up that scene, but it is really in the hands of the applicant. They could just appeal, for example.
Okay.
But it could be safer. It could be safer for this committee.
With regard to the to what's currently before us, is it possible, and I don't know how we do this legally, if we offered a deferment with specific, and they've heard our comments with regards to the guarantees of exactly what do bungalows mean in numbers, what guarantee have we got for numbers of affordable housing, and then covering the points that you've raised about ensuring that the policies are addressed appropriately, how can we progress that at this stage, if I have agreement of my colleagues?
I hear what you say, Councillor Organ. I really feel that you want to secure the promises which are being made by the applicants in terms of provision on the bungalows, in terms of provision of affordable housing. There is a way forward, but the way forward is to present to us the information which makes it exceptional. But I think, in my view, I feel that it would be in members' interests to defer the application tonight, to allow that information to be submitted to the local authority, so we can include that in our considerations, and for members then to determine the conversation, having that information included.
Chair, do you know why I like this? It then gives us a chance to have something substantive to debate, and we can agree or disagree on that submission, but at least it gives us some. So I don't know whether I could persuade my colleagues to agree a deferment and then allow those things to be in place whereby we can then revisit this one, because this is really important. We have a great chance here to actually do some good, but let's, as I agree with my colleagues behind me, let's do it in the right way.
I have several more speakers, but if there is a proposal for a deferment so that the committee, let's say, makes better judgment, if that's the general feeling, if it's not the general feeling, I won't carry on. We'll carry on with the speakers and go to the proposition.
Through you, Chairman, there's already been a proposal to agree.
Yeah, I know, but...
So unless that's withdrawn or failed, we can't go to the proposal.
Well, I'll go to the proposal then and ask him, would he remove the proposal?
Yes, I would, and I would second the proposal for deferment.
Great.
Shall we do that in one swift meeting?
Okay, we're happy with that. So the proposal is withdrawn, and the new proposal is to defer an applicant you're listening to, let's put it so that the application is put in the correct way.
First the next meeting, Chair.
Well, if they can do it by the next meeting, they may not.
Through you, Chairman, that's highly unlikely because we in practice we have about a week before we finish reports off between meetings.
And you have to give so many days.
So it would be the next available cycle.
Okay.
And it's, if we could we specify for the reasons the deferment is to allow evidence of the exceptional circumstances to be submitted and investigated.
Right, are you proposing that?
Sorry, could we add to that, and we also want clarification on what the affordable housing offer and bungalows would be as well. We have that to the
All those in favour of that proposal to defer?
1, 2, 3.
Unanimous.
It
It's unanimous.
is indeed.
Right, the application after all that time will be deferred, but at least it'll probably make for a better.
Did you get 13 now?
Because I looked at the numbers and we won't do it.
Right, the next application is in Overston, I think it's 0498.
Thank you, Chairman. The site for members now is located off the main road, opposite the primary school within Overstone. It is a detached dwelling with a detached single-storey side extension which forms a garage and a snooker playroom. The neighbour at number 61 is a bungalow and has objected to the proposal due to the impact on residential amenity and the fact it's contrary to policy, and especially the 45-degree raw angle as set out in the supplementary planning guidance on designing household extensions. Although there is an opinion, it already encroaches on it, given the angles between the two properties, this exists already, which you will see by the plot plan and also the photographs before members tonight. This is only guidance only and is a material consideration. Officers have considered the application and have got the application amended a number of times, and the extension now has been removed from the southern side of the flat roof single-storey part to the more northwest part, which you can see by the plot plan. So the shaded area, the hatched area, is where the two-storey element goes. As you can see, the south is to the south, so down the bottom, the north is to the north. So you can see where the sun will shine during the day. Yeah. So amended plans. So the applicant has worked with the case officer and has submitted amended plans to overcome the original concerns. Officers now consider the application is acceptable and will not impact or have a detrimental impact on the immunities of the adjoining neighbours. The neighbour also does have a secondary glazing which also serves that room. So there is a window to the front and also there's patio doors to the side. So there's both. So that was considered as part of the decision-making process. It is considered the design of the scheme is in keeping with the building and the locality. It will not affect listed buildings or tree preservation orders. Overall, the proposal is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval. Members' attention are drawn to late representations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Catherine. Two speakers. Mr. Harrison, who's against the application?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am representing my father, who lives next door to the applicants. It's interesting, during the previous application, actually hearing officers speak. The officers said that it was for the applicant to make a case to not apply guidance. In fact, you said policy, but I'm including guidance with policy. That members needed to rely on robust advice, that it was okay to breach that guidance, and that you also said that 1 week should be allowed between the publication of the report and the actual meeting that this went to. This report was published on Wednesday, the agenda was published on Tuesday last week. We've had very little time to prepare for this meeting. Ultimately, what we're complaining about is the gratuitously overbearing nature of this development. So, as you'll see from the supplementary information that late representations you put in, there's a photograph outside my father's window. As you can see, the existing extension is single storey, you can't see it. The impingement will exist as a result of a 2-storey extension going up within 4 metres of that window. That's an unacceptable impingement, and it flies in the face of the supplementary guidance that states very clearly that the minimum distance of a habitable room and a blank wall will be 12 metres. This is 4 metres from the point that you can see right in front of you. In addition to that, there is supposed to be a 45-degree angle between the proposed extension and the existing property. That's actually 30 degrees, not 45, 30 degrees. The front aspect of my father's property stares straight at Mr. Moore's property. That angle means that you'll have a 2-storey building, which you can see outlined on the drawing in front of you, staring through your front window. Now, regardless of what you say about the French windows at the rear of the property, the fact remains that that's irrelevant. Firstly, it's an already dark room. It's called pine trees. It's surrounded by some very, very large trees with tree preservation orders on them, I understand. Now, those French windows are there in order to light an already darkened room. They do not mitigate against blocking out of further light. It seems utterly ridiculous to me that this application can even be put forward to the committee for approval, just because of the gratuitous nature of the overbearing. Councillor Ritchie earlier spoke of a community policy, i.e. the community should be behind any development. Now, the parish council support us. They do not agree with the application. They support the community.
Can you wind up, please?
I'm indeed trying to wind up as soon as I can.
Well, you'll have to wind up pretty quick because your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you very much. I don't understand why Mr. Moore hasn't considered extending to the land at the back. He has ample room and it doesn't overlook anybody, and indeed over the other side. We have tried to make that point to officers, but it's not been accepted. Mr. Moore also runs a business, a house clearance business, and I am severely concerned that this extension is going to allow him to expand that business. Finally, I'd like you to consider my father's well-being. He does not want to stare at this extension. He plays his piano every evening, it's his best friend. He uses that front room daily.
I'm sorry, but can you tell me?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Second speaker is Mr. Pike, who's the agent.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Mr. and Mrs. Moore live at number 63, as you know, as a port of the village. Their daughter and family live just down the road, and their granddaughter will attend school just opposite. For this reason, they would not wish to move to a bigger house, but would like to have an additional bedroom. The proposed extension is to be built above the existing garage, which is situated a metre from the boundary, number 61. The owner of number 61 has expressed concerns that the extension will overshadow the window of his lounge. You've taken these concerns into consideration, and to this end have amended the plans in consultation with your planning officer. The roof has been lowered using different tiles to allow a shallower pitch to be constructed. The ceiling height has been reduced below the roof, and the size of the extension has been reduced so that it does not obstruct light from the south. My client has offered to remove 3 trees from his garden, which should improve the light both of the garden and the windows of the neighbour. The window in question is not the only window in the lounge, which has also fully glazed patio doors to the south elevation. We do not believe the extension will have a detrimental effect on the window, but if it does, my client has offered to install the roof window in the south side of the bungalow, which will make the lounge brighter than it's ever been. As has been demonstrated, we have made every effort to eliminate any disadvantage to the neighbouring property and have worked in close liaison with the planning department. This being the case, I would like to support your planning officer's recommendation
and approve the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. There's no local member here. So, Councillor Owen-Smith.
Yes, can we see again the picture with the drawing of the bicycle, the neighbour? Yes.
Just to let you know, this isn't being done professionally, it's just an indication of what what they think, or the objectors think that it's going to look like. Obviously, you've got to remember that this window is also a west-facing window, and the extension will be going to the northwest of that window.
That's where the extension's going. Please don't be misled.
Sorry, you can't interrupt me, sir.
So I'm a bit puzzled. What I also, I'm sure if I always puzzle that neighbours cannot find a compromise and arrive at that position. I think first the hedge is quite high so it's also shadow everything. So I am a bit puzzled, but if officers have worked with the applicant to make sure that everything was law and so on, I just wonder if we are not misled by the drawing on the side. And now I don't know who is right or who is wrong, because if the drawing on the side is a reality, I would suppose that is a bit oppressive. If now you are much farther and a bit lower, I would say that is acceptable. So I will listen to what other colleagues have to say before.
Okay. We'll ask the officers to answer those points. Officers?
Trying to be tactful, Chairman, I think that does seem rather an exaggeration.
Yeah.
It seems rather high and rather closer on that line there than we would expect that to look.
Why didn't the applicant submit a similar drawing?
I'm sorry, sir, but you can't speak again.
I did.
Well, next time you do, I'm afraid you will go out the door. I do apologise, but that's the position. Please don't speak again.
Understood.
That's to anybody, okay? Right, Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, I looked at this application and thought that this all seemed fairly straightforward. But that photograph that has been offered with the, with sort of suggestion of what the, of what the building might look like, I find that a little bit worrying. Now, I know that perhaps that's, that is an objector's view of how it might look. It's not an architect's drawing, but it just leaves me with this. That's the feeling.
Yeah.
I would like to see what what an architect would offer as an illustration as to what the view from that window would be.
You're about to see it. Well, you will when Google gets there.
So this is the bungalow.
We need to be further, yeah.
So there are sort of,
Okay.
that faces, that's the front, isn't it?
That's so where the gable is on the bungalow, that's that front looking towards number 63 at that angle, and number 63 itself is at a slight angle as well. It's not 90 degrees from the road, it's at a slight angle, you can see.
That's a school. So that's the bungalow. That's its, lots of trees.
We don't see a lot.
That's purely on top of those garages on the right of the tree.
But further back.
But further back.
Yeah, so in a sense the extension is coming forward, but it's the original application included development pretty much on all the back roof element. So what the applicants have now done in consultation with officers is to pull it away from the southern end of the building so it creates that openness and allows that daily light which comes from the east all the way south to the west during the day. And again, sort of as mentioned previously, the extension is to the northwest of the window. Yes, it's on the northeast of the house, but it's northwest of the neighbouring property.
Okay. Councillor Matson next.
Yes, thank you. Officers have suggested that this is all in accordance with laid down policy and procedure, but Mr. Harrison said that this extension is going to be 4 metres from another property and not 15, which is legislation, and it's going to be 30 degrees when legislation says it should be 45 degrees. So
well, the officer explained that, but
yeah,
she would do it
it's already there.
In a sense, we've got our local plan, we've got our development plan, which members are aware of, and also we've got supplementary planning documents and guidance, which gives you guidance. There's nothing in policy itself to say it should be 45 degrees or 60 degrees. It's not a firm written rule. It's guidance only.
thank you.
Councillor Olga.
Yeah, okay. So I learned some policy though. Okay, a couple of things is, and it's something again that I think I mentioned ages ago about having a bit of IT kit that could superimpose these things from various angles so that we could see rather than sort of a
That's a technical phrase, Councillor Olga, a bit of IT kit.
Yeah, yeah. And it would be, I don't know how much that stuff costs, but a lot, yeah. It would be handy rather than have a pen on a postcard. But one thing I just want to raise is that, so to get me right, that the applicant has worked with officers on this.
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right. And has there been, in these matters, do we know whether there has been correspondence with the neighbours as well and trying to placate concerns and worries?
I can't comment on what's happened with the applicant and negotiations with the neighbouring property.
Right.
All I can say is when we get amended plans, I can just borrow the file. We've gone out for reconsultation.
Okay.
One, when the application was submitted on the original plans. The second time was for revised drawings, and a third time was made in the most recent.
Okay. But we did hear from testimony that offers have been made about moving trees and trying to mitigate any worries or concerns, certainly from the agent. That certainly happened. Yeah. Okay. The only final option is, and I don't know whether this is the right case for it, is whether we can actually go and have a look, and or whether I see a few sides. I don't know whether I get support from my colleagues.
You can see it all from the pictures.
Yeah, well we can't because we don't know whether that picture is an accurate representation of what.
Well, this one is, isn't it?
Yeah, but yeah, I know, but I didn't feel support on that. But as it stands, Chair, I have to go along with officers on this. I've seen there to be correspondence and support.
Build a wall facing your front window, see what happens.
I think he was trying to say he didn't like that.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I think there
is that proposal or not?
Oh yeah, I did propose that we support.
Okay, if you're proposing it, do you have a second? I'll take you, Councillor Ritchie. Do you wish to speak again or reserve?
No, I feel that without actually seeing the thing or seeing more graphics of it.
No, it's proposing the application be approved.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were still.
No.
Yeah, so.
No, it's
your
proposing the
idea of
application be
Of a visit.
Well,
We could go together.
Sometimes, Mr. Olga.
Right, listen, do I have another secretary? Come on, Councillor. Do you wish to speak on it?
No, I think everything necessary has been said. I suggest, or second, that we go with officers.
Okay.
Can I just clarify and double check something for the room, just so we're all clear? The 4 metre thing, that's not an issue. That's not a planning issue, is it?
There is already a 4 metre gap
That's what I'm saying. It's
between
already.
these two
It's because
properties,
it's
so
already
that
there.
is the current reality.
Yeah, it's because it's already.
Yeah,
there.
it's just that there's a single story rather than...
Yeah, I understand. I just wanted to make it clear for everybody in the room that we weren't just ignoring the facts of the 4 metres, because I don't think it would have been said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Osborne, I watched
Yeah.
you storm out of a development control committee meeting on a very similar basis.
Thank you very much. Right, we have a proposal, the application be approved and it's been seconded. Those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8.
Right, those against? 8-4. 8-4, the application is approved.
Allowing man to build a wall in front of my father's living room window. He's only living room.
Madam, I'm awfully sorry, but
You're not sorry.
I'm not sorry at no, you did right. Next application is in Crick. And by the way, the applicant that went out the door, the objector that went out the door, I did walk out of a County Council Planning Committee meeting a few years ago because, to my mind, irregularities were taking place, which was proved to be so, and I didn't want anything more to do with the committee, and they haven't done so since. Although I'm a member of it this year, I've never been to a meeting either. So the gentleman who objected was quite right. I did walk out in similar circumstances, but only because I objected to something that was happening. Councillor Cecilia Lerman Swift was there at the time.
But there's no president, is
But you were young.
I was, yeah. So, Craig, 0622.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site actually relates to a small vernacular building which has frontage to the main road in Crick. The building is constructed of stone, monopitch roof and a slate roof, and currently provides ancillary accommodation to 17 Main Road in Crick. You'll see from the photographs that that building has already been converted as an annex and was converted into development rights. So what the current application seeks consent for tonight is not for any external alterations or internal alterations, but it's seeking consent purely to use the property as a separate unit, separate from 17 Main Street, where its current use is ancillary to 17 Main Street. You'll see from the report that there have been some concerns raised by the County Highways Authority, and the reason for the concern is that this development does not have a designated off-street parking provision. In Moffat's opinion, the current building in its current form would equally attract one vehicle, which would be equally parked on the road as well. And as such, we do not feel that its impact on the highway network will be of such severity that it will substantiate a reason for refusal. And as such, we'll recommend this application be approved, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Two speakers, Mrs. Jensen from the PC.
Yes.
Go on.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jill Jameson from the Crick Parish Council. Two planning applications in relation to this building have already been considered by the Parish Council, and both were rejected by us and Highways on the grounds of no parking provision. This building was first mentioned in the planning application in 2015 from 21 Main Road, and it was described as a storage area and part of the land for 21 Main Road, Crick. This was storage to a large detached bungalow, which was subsequently demolished following planning approval in 2012 for 2 new dwellings on the site. This application was for the change of use of the storage building to a self-contained home office for plot 2. It was given approval with the attached conditions. The office shall be used as an ancillary office to plot 2, as allowed under the permission of 2015, and shall not be sold or let as a separate office.
At present, the site has limited parking, and if allowed as a separate office, it is likely the proposal would result in a detrimental impact on highway safety. Photographs showed the building in 2015 as nothing more than a dilapidated shed for storage. It's now reappeared in the application before us and described as an annex to number 17, the Maltings, Main Road, Crick. It has undergone complete refurbishment into a residential accommodation. It was granted a lawful development certificate in June of this year as ancillary to the residential use of number 17, the Maltings. Crick PC objected to this application on the following grounds. Crick Neighbourhood Plan Policy 11J. This requires suitable off-street parking due to the problem highlighted throughout the plan of not sufficient off-street parking in the village, and particularly in the main road, High Street. This proposal has no off-street parking and therefore offends the plan, and it should be remembered that the reason given for limiting the previous permission was the lack of parking available. What has changed, other than the situation has got worse? We now have far more houses within Crick. This proposed development will undoubtedly bring one, if not two cars if you count visitors, to park on a street already under pressure from the traffic visiting the co-op throughout the day. It is also just a few yards from the central crossroads of the village and the school. Long-term parking will encourage parking on the double yellow lines already in place to seek to minimise danger at the busiest location in the centre of the village. Highways have identified the lack of parking as a serious concern and have recommended refusal. And I look to the committee not to override our neighbourhood plan and to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Reynolds, last but not least, sir.
Yes, for the littlest as well.
You're enjoying the whole evening, aren't you?
That's right, yes. Sir, I've looked through the papers and I haven't seen anything from the Highway Authority or the Parish Council about the planning considerations that have taken place here. And they fall into two elements, I think. The first being the lawful element, and the second being the planning policies. For me, sir, the Highway Authority have not looked at this from a planning point of view, and I wonder whether they have looked at the lawful position. For this reason, I was told many years ago that one thing you don't do with a planning condition or a reason for refusal is come up with an enforceable, not enforceable proposition. Or the position of other public services, i.e. here the Highway Authority. I think the proposal that the Highway Authority have come up with is enforceable, or not enforceable, because the highway is for everybody, and it's not for the people who are going to be unusable for their parking position. And secondly, they have the gift themselves of providing the what they're looking for, the alternative means of securing the position. They can put a CPZ together, they can put yellow lines. Why don't they, if they're so worried about that? I think that is very unenforceable to do that. Turning to the issues on the planning side, so I needn't read them out to you because they're all in the report. The references to the MPPF, the quick plan, neighbourhood plan, all of which favour the application.
Thank you, sir. And thanks for stopping. I appreciate that. Chuck, do you wish to make a comment on what has been said?
Yes, please. Mrs. Jameson spoke about everybody earlier about the on-street park, and I do sympathise with that situation. I do know Crick extremely well, and I do fully understand that there is a lot of on-street parking within that particular area. But equally at the same time, you must have regard to the lawful use of this particular building. The lawful use of this particular building, it is an annex. And as an annex, there are no limitations on the vehicles which are attracted to that use and its lawful use. You can have one vehicle, two vehicles, as long as it remains ancillary. There are still a number of vehicles attracted to that use. What we're saying is that also in 2015, there was an office approved for its use. That office use, based on its current floor area, and I'm sure Councillor Longley will give me some advice on it, could attract 4 people to that site. What we're saying as Octopus is that this particular application, we're not seeking consent for the alteration, any external alterations to the property itself. There is no impact on neighbouring properties by reason of overlooking, overshadowing, or any those concerns present. The concern raised from the highway authority is that it doesn't have one designated parking space as they would require. So what we're saying is that having regard to that one designated parking space, which would be on street, what difference would that be in terms of its current permitted use?
Right, we have 2 local members, one is on the committee and one isn't. Have you decided which one of you wants to go first?
I'm bound to Catherine Lomax's desire to speak and allow.
Councillor Lomax will let you go then.
Thank you.
There's no
You have
treat
been
for
very
you, stand
patient, Catherine. You have been very patient, Catherine.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, committee, you heard what Parish Council Chairman has had to say. I was struck by a phrase which Councillor Wesley used earlier, and that was, you can't have it both ways. And it does seem to me, we've been told many times by our planners that the Highway Authority doesn't see any danger in particular applications. I've had this in my ward many a time. There's no danger on the highway, therefore there is no reason to reject an application. On this occasion, the Highway Authority says it is not acceptable, and we're being told that it is acceptable by our planners. We know, those of us who live locally, how very congested this area is, such that in fact we've now had yellow lines put down in this area. I don't know at what time of day the photographs were taken, because I've very rarely seen anything other than toes to, whatever it's called, parking on High Street and Main Road. So I really don't know why, in fact, we should not reject this application. The further point we might like to take into account is the congestion is so bad that I have asked the Environmental Health Department actually to monitor the air pollution at this crossroads, and that is what they're going to do later this year. So please reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Lomax. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I know this property quite well. I go up and down that street every day, and I've actually been in it. I went in it when it was a site office for the development of 2 big properties at the back. Now it's a dwelling. Let's face it, I think we have to listen to the people that live there, and in this case it's the parish council, isn't it? Okay, there was a speaker for, but nonetheless, this application is basically so they can flog it on, isn't it? And in my view,
That's a
and
good expression.
and I'm against it. I think it shouldn't have been a dwelling in the first place. I don't know how it managed to get that far down the line.
Okay. Councillor Longley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, again, I think that I take very seriously the comments that Chun says, and there's a technical argument that, and a good one, of course. However, I rarely go against the parish because they're the people that live in the area. I know Crick very, very well. I've never seen it as clear. The road down, it must be taken very early in the morning on a sunny day or something, because whenever I go down there, it's very difficult, and I park it very regularly. I find it very difficult to park there. In fact, there's a couple of pubs, as you know, and there's, more importantly, there's the co-op, and that road is always a chicane to get through. And any addition to that, I think, is going in the wrong direction. You've got to read the Highway Authority, and it says vehicles parked upon the live carriageway constitute an obstruction to the free flow of passing traffic and carries a significant volume and so on and so forth. So I'll be voting against it. I think it's a move in the wrong direction.
Okay, Councillor Organ.
Yeah, it's interesting that the second line of the Highways Authority talks a little bit about the history of the site. I wonder if this is accurate. It says that the barn has no on-site parking provision, and it was made ancillary to the malting in order that any vehicle associated with that barn would have parking within the curtilage of Malton.
Yeah.
So presumably there was parking facilities for that, but it wasn't on the road when it went to an ancillary. Is that correct?
No.
So this is a lie.
There's an application when the two houses at the back were built. Subsequently, an application was submitted for this outbuilding for a home office building,
Okay.
which was tied to plot 2, if I recall. So, therefore, because of the type of office, if you think about an office instead of a house, the type of use, there's going to be more people associated with office building than potentially small single-storey dwellings. Now, the application for the lawful development certificate is a lawful development certificate. It's not a planning application. It's saying it's lawful that this property can be used as ancillary residential accommodation to number 17. So there's no condition imposed.
Okay, so where did this business come from that the vehicles associated with the barn would be in the curtilage of the maltings? That must have come from somewhere. Somebody's read it somewhere.
It's a home office, so fundamentally, for instance, you could have your business from there.
No, I accept all that. I'm just wondering where this has come from.
Introduce as many people as you
Yeah,
want.
I accept all that. But I'm wondering whether this has been written somewhere in order to get it to become an ancillary to the maltings, because somebody had a concern about parking at that time.
In a sense, you can convert buildings within your own curtilage and say, actually, yeah, this is ancillary to the main property.
Okay.
Now, when it becomes separate, that's when you need planning permission.
Right, and we're
And to refuse planning permission, sorry for you, Chairman, you've got to be able to say, it being a separate dwelling is going to have a material difference. If this is not a new property we're authorising, which is where the highways black and white policy absolutely comes in. This is an existing bit of...
But the Highway Authority's recommendation is a material issue, isn't it?
I also like to remind members of the NPPF, especially paragraph 109, which states development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe.
Well, I think that, well, I thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me that bit of inquisitive questioning. And I believe local authority is a material issue, and they have raised issues about concerns about the impact it's going to have, and the local people know what they're talking about. We've heard. So I, unfortunately, in this case, would have to go along with not approving it. So.
Not with officer advice. Against.
Yeah, that's yeah.
It's a late time.
Yeah.
You're not supporting officers' advice?
No.
Councillor Ritchie. Sorry?
Well, I know this road well because I
You have, I beg your pardon, you have proposed refusal.
Didn't propose, I said, well, I wouldn't be going with it.
Okay, no, I thought you didn't. Councillor Ritchie, officer said quite rightly that you proposed.
I apologise.
I very often pass around the back of of creek to find heading east, and I know what a nightmare this road can be. I usually sort of cut around the back and round the marches to avoid getting along there. But you know, some of you in this committee have been here for a long, long time. You must have given planning permission to put a co-op on this very street, with very, very little parking around about the co-op.
In the 60s though.
Was it?
None of us is to blame for that one.
You sure?
I wasn't here then.
Well, it strikes me as a nonsense that the co-op is there. But there must be other houses, lots of other large houses along the road that that don't have any off-street parking. Is that not the case? I go entirely with the officers in arguing that look, this is not actually going to make any difference. It's not clear to me that that this is going to attract yet more cars wanting to park in that. It depends what use you actually put the building to. Councillor Robertson talked about flogging it on. Well, yeah, flogging it on, but in a way that creates another small home for somebody who needs one in a village. I on this occasion, go with officers' advice.
Are you proposing?
Well, I will propose that we go with officers' advice.
Well done, Councillor Ritchie. Do we have a seconder? I saw this hand first. Do you wish to say something, sir?
If my understanding is correct, this building is an office and could attract more people and more cars to this office, or has permission to be in office. Has been in the past. Whereas if it becomes just a house for somebody, it's less likely to have parking, more vehicles around, and therefore I'm seconding.
Chair, can we just have a correction on that? It's actually not an office now. It's ancillary to, it's part of a dwelling.
It's a home office.
It's no office.
No, it has consent to be used as a home office. At the moment, is a building which is ancillary. It's an annex.
Right.
And what we're saying, just a message through you, Chairman, what we're saying as officers is that as it has approval for a home office, that approval can be implemented. And as such, it can attract a higher number of vehicles than what's already attracts. At present, as an annex, it can attract one vehicle, possibly two vehicles associated with use. And we're saying, as a separate dwelling, it's unlikely to attract any more than its current use as an annex.
Okay. I've got to say that I go through Crick 3 times a week, so that's 6 journeys through Crick to the motorway. And I drive a 3.5 ton Mercedes extra long wheelbase van. And I come up to the crossroads there, turn right along near the co-op, and you want to know what it's like to go around the corner there. And to be quite honest, it's worse going along the road to Watford Road. If you go in a 3.5 ton van there, you take your life in your hands, wrong side of the road, you meet people on the bend. I think it's worse than the main street, to be quite honest, the road I'll take. But, yeah, just thought I'd mention it. Right, if nobody else wishes to speak, we have a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour? All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
8.
Those against?
4, 5.
5. voting. The application is approved. So I can give you some numbers. Well, thank you everybody for staying late.